for Thursday, 1/12 of 2023. And that makes it what, a 10 number, or is that? No, it's 11. Today's an 11 day for all those do, or a 2 for those who follow more that sort of thing. And numerology really is about to get it. And tomorrow night for Friday the 13th, Reverend Mary Hawk and Reverend Don are going to talk Friday the 13th, numerology, and all of the good things around triskaidekaphobia, fear of Friday the 13th, and why people like big numbers, little numbers, numerology. It'll be a great opportunity. But for today, your opportunity is Ask Don Anything. It's a series of questions where we're opening up, and me too. We'll ask me anything. AMA they call it. They do it a lot on Reddit, but we're going to do it right here. And the first question I've got are you planning to continue your vlogs?
I would say yes, but I would say to some extent that's what we're doing here.
Mm-hmm.
It's certain. I don't know that I will go back to that same format, but being here every day, being accessible to questions, really is a continuation in its
And
own way.
absolutely. And you also have books out it. So you have
Yes,
book 1 and 2. So do you have plans to bring out the third one?
I do, but I do not have a date yet.
Okay.
But I would think probably this year sometime.
But you can get your first and second books at curlingpublishing.com right now.
Yes, Reverend Don's Book of Questions, Volume 1 and 2.
And talking about books, how are we doing on the Kickstarter campaign? It looks like we're doing pretty well.
It's moving along. We are at 1872, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And for anyone who is interested, you can get your own hardcover collectible copy of Reverend Don's Super Omnibus of Incantations and Invocations for All Occasions through this Kickstarter.
There we go. Um, Having said that, so the second question I've got is, why do you like being a witch? It's it. So I know that you've been one all your life, everything else, but why do you like being a witch? I thought that was an interesting. That was from Brent.
I think that's actually a very good question because it's one that I don't know that I've ever had that asked in exactly those terms. And my answer to that is it gives me a great deal more control over my life and my relationship to spirit. Having that relationship to spirit, that relationship to existence, is the thing that I like about it. And also having all the very different tools that magic offers in life. I feel like I have a much wider repertoire of ways to deal with things.
All righty. So we're going to show this one. Thank you, and ask you from Ryan. What got you started down the magical path?
For me, it was my parents. My mother was the head of the Corellian tradition before me. My father was a ceremonial, and I had magical influences from both of them. And
Hmm.
I don't think there was a time in my life that influence wasn't there. So I started down the path very, very early. Some of the earliest things I remember are metaphysical in character. I
That's
mean, I can
interesting.
remember being taught about spirit guides shortly after my grandmother's death, and as a consequence of it. But I was very, very young at that time.
For me, it's a little different. So I can talk about it a lot of different times, but I finally kind of marked it down to Pastor Raymond Pocky, who would go on to be a well-known evangelical and would do a great deal of things. And I was in his first church. But every Halloween, right around Halloween, he'd have the anti-witch Halloween sermon, and he would talk about how Ouija boards were entering into being sold to children, and he would talk about all the TV shows because, after all, you had Bewitched, we had I Dream of Jeannie. TV was being invaded with occult themes. You had Night Gallery. You had also, so can't remember. I was 8 years old, like 1972. Bewitched had entered syndication. I Dream of Jeannie had been entered syndication. Night Gallery was going strong. Night, creature, and all sorts of things. And he would rally against us, and he would talk about all the sorts of things that witches were doing, and it really inspired me to go looking for them. People don't know. Originally, I was God's spy. I was going to be the spy that went to found him out, and I would have an encounter with later, a little bit later in life, with witches, and found out they were very different from what I was. That it would begin my lifelong fascination, and eventually my conversion and moving into it. But it was that speeches every year that really got me like intrigued about witches. Hmm.
Evangelical ministers are best advertising.
Oh yeah, I mean I remember when we with witch school, we were pretty early on. We had a pastor, First Baptist Church of Kentucky, and the pastor kind of rolled up on us. Called us and said, "We need to take all these kids off." And I said, "You can't be doing this. You're porn. You're everything else. You're not allowed to do under 18." And I was very calm and collected. We told them that we were well within the millennials, and just putting in there, ask questions. I always want to let people know they can ask questions. And we see Mary. Mary's joined us again this evening. We thank you. And so yeah, and then we told him that, and it was very interesting that he was saying that you can't do it. And that we did. Eventually, he did send a list in with parent signatures, um, and we did remove those individuals at least this time.
Hmm.
You probably came back into the system. And what was funny is I had a friend, Brian, who a couple of months later told me, "Did you know that you made it to one of the evangelical conferences? It was called the Witch School Problem." And basically, it rated out that if every one of your people get in a witch school, your entire teenage congregation would join. It was quite something. Was that?
Yes, those were the days.
And so the question is, do you meditate?
Do I meditate? Absolutely.
I'm not as good a meditator as I am. I've gotten
Hmm.
better during COVID. I did practice a lot more. I do practice stillness, and I do walk. I walk. My meditations are very active, and I walk, and I can walk for periods of time to change my state.
Hmm. And
You know,
that's just as much meditation as anything.
mhm,
I find I often do that when I drive. I go into something of a meditative state.
mhm.
But I do try to do daily meditation, um, to a greater or lesser extent, depending on where I am in my life. Sometimes it will be a longer period of time, sometimes a shorter period. But I do try to do that. I think
And
it makes a big difference.
thank you joining us, Nicholas, for joining us. And he says, "So lovely to catch the chat live," and we do too. And then of course it's on tape afterwards, so we can keep these for prosperity, and people continue to look at them. Um, so let me go. And good evening from IAP on our radio. Hi, Earl. Welcome to have you aboard too. Uh,
Welcome.
so let us ask the question: Is that and so we already had a question of logs. Do we meditate and everything else? We're for a little while AMA, which means ask ask me questions. Or ask us anything. It's kind of one of those things that come out of Reddit. It's become kind of fascinating. Uh, so the question is, so let me see it. So the question here is that why do you wear your hair so long? What? That's not okay. Go ahead and answer that, Don.
um, it's a spiritual thing.
Is it
Some of it
really?
has to do with my ancestors. I happened to grow up in an era when it was possible to wear your hair longer, and
Hmm.
I was encouraged to that by my mother, who did not wear her own hair particularly long. That's beside the point. And the other thing is, if I get it cut shorter, I get letters. And
Do
so,
you?
if people historically, if people even think I've cut it, I will start hearing. I've had
I
times when it was just back in a ponytail, but they didn't see the tail, and people would get upset. And I came to think that I was wearing it long also for others who could not. And I found that it's such a part of my image that I really don't think that even if I chose to depart from it spiritually, I don't think I really could without disturbing a lot of people. And I
That's
wouldn't know what to do. I mean, the last time I actually did have it shorter, I found I really missed playing with my tail because I normally do tend to wear it back, and
Mhm.
as habit, I tend to play with the ponytail. And without that, I really noticed the lack of it.
Well, I do notice people react strongly when I remove my beard,
Hmm.
which I have to do every once in a while, because I get uh, ingrown hair.
And the other thing that there are a lot of spiritual beliefs about hair,
Mhm.
including times when it is appropriate to remove it. But one of them is that hair will tend to hold on to um, energy. In traditional magical practice, it was very often the custom to let the hair loose before doing magic or while doing magic. And there were also um, practices of binding it in various ways as a magical technique as well. Hair has a long history in magic, and um, often for mourning in many cultures, hair would be cut in order to release the connection to what has passed. So that would be one occasion when it would be a spiritual thing to cut it. And of course, a number of religions tend to practice head shaving to symbolize renunciation of connection to the physical world.
Mhm.
But I do not come from a religion which renounces connection to the physical world. I come from a religion which embraces it. And so that would be another reason I wear it long.
Okay.
Also, it reminds me it wasn't always gray.
No. Okay, so we got another question from Ryan. I guess we'll that
Mm.
what do you all think about lifetimes like being a tree for thousands of years? Well, most trees don't live thousands, they live hundreds. There's the bristlecone, there's a few that live thousands. And they're also clone tree forests. I've been really studying trees lately, but I don't think so. The idea of being a tree for a long time, I don't know. It's got to be a very interesting being to be a tree, especially now we're learning how they communicate and they talk and how
Mhm.
they're building these interlying networks. I was just reading about mother trees, about how they exist and everything else. But what do you think about that? The idea of being that you might reincarnate from a tree, you might be incarnated into a tree.
Well, the background that I come from holds the point of view that in the course of incarnation, your soul may be incarnated as all kinds of different things, but it will tend to stay one thing for a number of lifetimes. So if you're a human in this lifetime, you're most likely going to be in the next one and was in the last one. But that doesn't mean your soul has never been anything else. We also believe in a simultaneity of incarnation. So you could be a tree right now, another aspect of your soul, because the soul isn't just a bigger version of your conscious mind. It's far more complicated than that. Um, and as to what I think of it, I think that it would be a very different existence. But most traditional paganism did absolutely recognize the spirits of plants and particularly trees, and often interacted with them as we Corellians certainly do today. And I would assume most other species of modern paganism.
And so, getting back to the hair piece, Arlene has mentioned that's quite interesting about cutting it for grief. Or in Judaism, the hair is left to grow for a mourning period of at least 30 days is over.
And there are many different beliefs, and they vary greatly by culture.
And
In a lot of cultures, a widow in particular would cut her hair short at the death of her husband, and when it had grown back to what was considered the normal length, then her period of mourning was considered to have ended. That was a case, for example, in ancient Egypt.
and so, gotta dig the hairdos. Thank you from Nicholas. As the kids say, I'd love to know your thoughts on the nature of self discovery through witchcraft and how it is the process can avail itself to other areas of one's life.
I absolutely believe that that witchcraft and spirituality in general are a path of self-discovery, and that is probably the most important part of it. I spoke earlier about relationship to the world, to existence, to spirit, but that is a path of self-discovery just by itself. I think that when you enter any practice of magic, you have, whether you intend it or not, entered a path of self-discovery because it will reveal yourself to you, whether you particularly want to see yourself or not. I don't think you can avoid it when you have began a spiritual or a magical path. I think that it is inevitable that self-discovery, not only in your magical practice, but throughout your life. I don't think it's possible to go otherwise on a spiritual path. Now, it may unfold over a great deal of time, but I certainly, for myself and for the background I come from, that aspect of self-discovery was very, very important.
Hmm. Um, for me, I guess I would agree with that. I mean, for me, it's been a lifelong kind of aspect. It's really changed my life, the practice of magic and doing things. And I've done some pretty amazing things. And coming out of a strong evangelical background. And I think on Martin Luther King Day, we're going to actually see, we actually have a really good story about some of this stuff about how lives can be transformed.
Mhm.
But we'll leave that as Monday. And the next question is, how do I transform into a druid? And do druids still exist? The answer to that one, of course, druids still exist. There's a lot of great people who do so. We actually have a new course on Witch School right now from the Black Mountain Druidery. So if you want to learn some of the basic of druidery, you can go right there to Witch School and take a free class.
Yes.
But how do you transform into a druid or any of those things?
Well, how you would transform into a druid is through study and training, just as you would anything else.
Mhm.
And do druids still exist? It depends in part on your terminology, but there are many orders of druidry in the world today,
Mhm.
which have been founded in some cases in the present day, in some cases several hundred years ago. None of them can necessarily be said to have an unbroken chain to the ancient Celtic peoples, although there are some arguments about that too, but that would be too much to get into in this conversation. But I personally find um, all of the Druidic orders to be as legitimate as any other spiritual order, regardless of the degree of their connection to ancient Druidry. We
Mhm.
know very little about ancient Druidry, and one of the things that you'll notice if you look at the Druidic revivals of the last several hundred years is that the earliest ones treated the concept of Druidry in a universalist fashion. That a Druid was a wise practitioner who studied everything. And I don't know that there's anything in the ancient writings about the Druids that contradicts that definition, which is not necessarily the definition people like to put on it,
Mhm.
but I think is pretty close to what history suggests that they actually may have been, and certainly in the more modern era are.
All right. And so we got one. Why a star for the symbol? That's a really good question. And I think that for the biggest part, because of tradition, I mean, it comes out of some Pythagorean, that's been a
Mhm.
long-term symbol. And I think that it was a good symbol because we were able to see it represent some of the things. Leonardo da Vinci's man, uh, air, earth, fire, water, and spirit. Um, I think that
And
takes a
it's
little bit
simple to draw.
and simple to draw. And so I think it's just something that has become tradition from ancient times, and it is something that everybody uses as a general generic. Now it's very interesting for one of the evolutions I've seen, like the Corellium,
Mhm.
is that how you pronounce proper?
The Corellium.
Has become, and I think it's a very complex symbol,
It is.
but has become more and more common and being listed. So I think individual groups within the pagan traditions are seeing their hammers and their other symbols, the triple goddess and everything come out of it. But I think as a general symbol, is that the pentagram has been a symbol of magic for so long that it was just the first thing they absorbed.
Well, the pentagram can be seen in ancient Egypt and ancient Mesopotamia at the very dawn of written history.
Hmm.
In Egypt, it was the hieroglyphic symbol for magic, and placed in a circle, the hieroglyphic symbol for the spirit world, which is still basically the meaning many of us attach to it.
Hmm.
You mentioned the Pythagoreans; they used it as a sign of recognition. I think they were the first to use it in that way, and they used the unicursal pentagram. Um, and it's been there. It's been there for millennia. And so I do think tradition is essentially the answer.
Okay, so we're gonna let me just show you this one, and then we're gonna go back to the next one. So he has a question. Thank you. And the question is, curious on the growing trend. Okay, I can't see it all. Let me go ahead and see if I can. All right, no, I'm trying to get back to it. Oh no.
I can see it if you'd like me to read it.
Okay, sure.
I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on the growing public acceptance of witchcraft and the place of craft names in the future. As the craft becomes more commonplace, will the tradition of taking on another name continue, change, or take on some other form altogether? And I think the answer to that is yes. And I think it depends on the different practices of the different traditions.
Well, I find it very interesting. For me, craft names have gone the other direction. They
Mm,
were used originally. My original craft name was private, only
mhm.
to be used in my groups, only to be used there and not publicly. But yet, my Gardnerian mother had her own outside the craft. It wasn't the same as her magical name in the circle, but she had another one that she used for public appearances.
Mhm,
So I think it's gonna be a combination. I've always used my own name for my public workings,
mhm.
and very few people actually know my magical name.
And
Um,
I would have to say the same. I mean,
mhm,
I don't know. Lady Crystal knows my magical name. You, in theory, know my magical name, and I don't think
mhm,
there's another living person who does,
mhm.
because that's not what they were used for in my background.
So that's an inversion in our lifetime that I've seen really strong.
Mhm,
I do think witchcraft is going to become more common. I think people are going to adopt more names, and I think we're actually going to see people legally change their names, and begin a
mhm.
process of living those types of lives there. Uh,
In the Corellian tradition, we're not big on the idea of craft names as such. Vision names, yes, but craft name, which I mean, it's the same thing. But
right.
the way people use them,
Hmm.
some Corellians do, and that's all right. But we don't particularly encourage it. Um, but many people do choose to use pseudonyms, which isn't really the same thing.
I am starting to see something where I'm seeing the Cabots do it, and I think the Corellians are doing it, and a few others have done it, where they're adapting a familial name as part
Mhm.
of theirs. Maybe you want to talk about that a little bit.
Um, I believe for the Cabots, all of the initiated members use the name Cabot as part of their surname, at least publicly.
Hmm.
In the Corellian tradition, there are a number of people who do use the name High Corel or some variation on it as part of their name, usually because they have a connection to the family. Um, Although I don't know that there's any reason it can't be wider spread than that.
Um, yes, Mary, I am Corellian. I've been Corellian for quite some time. I just celebrated my 30th year as a elder
Yes,
back in November. Um, I guess I don't brandish it as much. And for my own craft name, kind of sort of my public craft name is Ed the Pagan, which was given to me media. So I saw one question that says, "What do you think about Atlantis?" And I just saw a newspaper article that they've now done another ground dig in northern near the coastal Africa, and that they're saying they're already screaming this might be Atlantis. I think people scream Atlantis a lot.
they do.
Do you have any ideas about that?
I have two. I do believe that when Plato wrote about Atlantis, he was referencing something historical.
Hmm.
I tend to agree with the theory that the date given was either intentionally exaggerated or um, was not correctly notated.
Hmm.
But everything else is actually quite reasonable in the description when you think
Hmm.
about it. A civilization on the Atlantic that had a broad reach that was centered in the islands of the Atlantic. I personally think that it references the late period of what we'll loosely call the monument builder civilization
Hmm.
in Northern Europe, which um, was still thriving in the British Isles not that long before uh, Plato's time. And I think that may have been what inspired the story of Atlantis, because part of that story was that there were surviving documents and so forth, and we know that those people from the British Isles had trading links to the Mediterranean. And we also know that a good chunk of the British Isles is now underwater, that was not necessarily then.
Hmm.
So I think it kind of fits the description better than a lot of things that people try to force into the description. But I also have to say the most interesting theory of Atlantis that I'm familiar with, which I am familiar with through you, is the idea that it's not actually part of the past, but part of the future, and that people are feeling it from that in terms not of what Plato wrote, but of what people talk about, which has very little to do with what Plato wrote.
Absolutely. Earl mentions that I've chosen to use my Native American name, which has been carried on for many years. That's terrific. I
Mhm,
think everybody has a right to. I think this is part of our sovereign rights. We can change our names. I mean, I think we
mhm,
do. I mean, I obviously did. I'm Ed Hubbard, but that's not my real name. It's my name. Real name is Edward August Hubbard. I don't go around by using Edward and things like that. So I changed it a long time ago. Even to legally, I send my tax returns and everything as Ed Hubbard,
mhm.
and that's just one example of it. And we're going to show this one. This one's a pretty big one. Um, and thank you, Cosmo, for this. What aspects do you bring from your magical practice and embrace of reality to help you feel balance, navigate uncertainty, and navigate the involving tech influenced nature of human condition? Well, I'll answer this one, but I'll let you do that first, Don.
This is very similar to an answer I made earlier. Um,
Hmm.
what I would say is that the biggest thing that I bring to those situations is sense of self. And I
Hmm.
feel that we were talking about magic as a path of self-discovery. Um, I feel it also gives or at least fosters a strong sense of self and a strong sense of inner balance. And so I would say that those techniques of meditation, those techniques of self-development, um, give a strong foundation from which to deal with change and evolution in the world around you.
So, to be perfectly honest with you, I don't have balance. I never have. I'm not a balanced person. I'm not. I don't seek it. You know, when they talk about work life balance, I say that's nonsense. Um, I don't have it. I don't look for about navigating uncertainty. I just face uncertainty directly. And for me, all my magic allows me for doing that. The ability to allow me to be pretty secure that I'm going to end up, no matter how the, hard the winds blow, no matter how bad the situation gets, how much trouble I get myself into by opening my mouth, how many projects I get into that I don't know how they're going to end or how we bring them forward. Pagan World TV, this project, earlier this year, I tried to do nightly pagan nightly news, um, and I really tried to do it. I didn't care, but that still proved again to be too much for me. And some people would be very embarrassed by that. Said, "Oh, you failed again." You know, like no, I just go ahead and say, "No, I don't care." Now I know more of what I need, and as such, and I'm also a very tech oriented person. I love technology. I really love technology, so I'm always embracing the technology. I'm always going forward to it. I just did an interview today. Um, I did an interview on Monday with the Conscious Network where I talked about that, and I did an interview today where I talk about the idea of tech and magic coming together. But so for me, my magic it keeps me together in a way so that I can be unbalanced, so that I can be, pushing forward into it. So for me, it's just the opposite. I think that this is one of the things me and Don have acknowledged. We're kind of opposite ends. I'll jump in. My magic lets me jump in blind into projects, no matter how turbulent the water.
It's a pretty good assessment.
Hmm. Earl mentions I am too not balanced. There are times I fly by the seat of my pants. I try to be, but it just doesn't happen. And that's a constant battle. So one of the good news is about like we have one of the things that you have to do is you have to know your skills and traits. So we have a pretty good executive team running Witch School and a couple of other things.
Hmm.
And we have some people really grounded into process and accounting and how everything manages. And then we have people who are basically good teachers and lead us spiritually and everything else. And then you have me who does the marketing, which is like I have to be on top of the trends and we have to change in the minute. Come on, people. So we have a real big mixture of personalities for that.
And I think
And
that's one of our greatest strengths.
mhm. And so I think what our magic does for us is that we have this common place of where we have seen things happen, where we've experienced it together. And while we may approach it differently and we may want different effects from it, we do all want the same thing. We want it to continue to work and we want to be able to continue sharing in the work of it.
Yes, indeed.
Hmm. So yeah, I think that's pretty interesting. Thank you for that question.
These have
Um,
been some interesting questions.
and as far as yeah, it is awesome, Mary. So you actually post people. I guess I get this question every once in a while. If some people know I'm Corellian, and some people, I guess, don't realize I'm that Corellian. I'm and worse. I'm first officer. I'm on the board of directors,
Hmm.
and I've been here. I've been here before most everybody. I mean, I'm part of the last bit of being recruited by the family,
That's true.
and then because I came in, and part of the reason I came in, I helped them. A lot of my work has been so structure and transformation. I don't there's very no high priest in the tradition has to worry about me coming in trying to be a ritualist or do a lot of the things that are pretty traditional. So let me go ahead and answer one thing. I am as much uh I'm sorry for what? I love it. That I have been more of the administrator of the church. I'm a worker
Mm.
on how to promote it and things of that nature. And in exchange, I have to know it. I could do any of the rituals I have to, but I haven't been forced to do a lot of rituals. I've been allowed to find other people. I have
Yes.
a temple of my own, and I get people. I have acting high priests and priestesses who do a lot of the ritual for me because my strength doesn't lie there. And
Mhm.
if it depended on that, um, it wouldn't. It I wouldn't be here. I just simply wouldn't. I can't do that. And I think, um,
No, thank you for being here, Earl.
yeah,
Have a lovely night.
and I think that's a big important part is that too many people think that we all have to be these cutter type of ideas, and no.
That I think is very important. As a tradition, we do not hold that point of view
Hmm.
that everyone must have exactly the same thing. We believe that strength comes through having the diversity of skills,
Hmm.
and as a result, we have many different expressions of spirituality among our people, some of which are highly individual, and I think that's wonderful.
And I just so the last question of the evening, and I think it's a challenge one. It's very interesting. Thank you, Mary. And it's an interesting one. Are you really in 50 countries?
Oh yes.
So they're asking, are you? So the question is, are you really in 50 countries? I think this is a challenge question. And thank you. I think we need to be challenged. Can you explain? Can you talk to that? and why they
We
would be.
really have a global presence.
Mhm,
And we have clergy in 50 countries. We have people in more than that. Lady Lori just came back from meeting with our temples in Greece.
mhm.
We have people throughout Spain. We have people throughout South America and Central America. We have people. We have major temples in the Philippines. We have temples in Africa. We
Oh, we
have
just have a new interfaith library that was a tradition-wide product in South
yes,
America.
yeah.
Cape
Lady
Town.
Rain just opened the Interfaith Library.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, we really are. The reason we are is one, we embraced the technology um, that allowed us to work with people who were isolated um, from other means. Because one of the reasons we were able to be in so many countries is that people were able to connect to the internet and learn with us who had nothing in their local community comparable. Um, and the other, of course, is that we were open and willing to advance in that way. And I think the fact that we don't believe in cookie cutter spirituality is also part of it. For example, if you were to go to our people in the Philippines, you would find that how they practice Correllianism is strongly influenced by their heritage, and it can be very different than what you might find in some other parts of the world. And the same with some of our people in South America, some of our people in North America. Um, it is it's not a cookie cutter situation, and yeah, we absolutely are around the world. For
Uh,
the Parliament of World's Religions, we're expecting the Archpriestess Rain to come in from Africa, and Sir Apu Adman Agama to come in from the Philippines, along with Lake Agama.
mhm.
Um, and yeah,
Yeah, I just said
we,
yes.
we
So thank you for the questions, and I think and I
yes,
really enjoyed it, and so we'll do this again, tomorrow n
absolutely.
and tomorrow we're gonna be back with Friday the 13th and everything else, and as always, we're gonna end with a prayer from, Reverend Don.
The Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we ask you to help us to express our light in the world in all its individual glory. Help us to be truly ourselves, to speak our truth, and to embrace our personal relationship with existence, that we may get the most out of this incarnation that we are in. Beloved Mother Goddess, beloved Father God, beloved ancestors, with love and with respect, we thank you, so mote it be. And thank you.